Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, good evening and a very warm welcome. My name is Michael Lang. I'm Vice Rector of WU, and it's my pleasure to welcome all of you on behalf of WU and also on behalf of our partners, Erste Bank and Die Presse. So we are very happy to host this event tonight. For us, it's extremely important to have this panel discussion tonight, and of course the topic is very relevant, and it's obvious that the topic is so relevant, therefore so many of you have decided to spend this evening here at our university. Why do we host such an event? Why do we have this kind of discussion here at WU? Well, there are several reasons for that. One is that this is a topic which is extremely interesting for the younger generation, and a university like ours has to be concerned about the future. Therefore, all topics which are relevant for the younger generations are, of course, relevant for university. Second reason is also because when we are talking about today's topic, then we are talking about very fundamental issues. We are talking about the decentralization of powers. Basically, we are talking about democracy. And I think the university should provide a setting to discuss these topics which are relevant for the society. And this topic, of course, is very relevant for society. And finally, it's very important that university like ours brings together people from different areas with very different background, and even more important that a university contributes to a topic by doing research in that area. And this is definitely the case here at WU. We have several researchers from different disciplines doing their research, focusing with their research on that topic. And probably most of you know that a couple of months ago we founded a research institute, the Research Institute for Cryptoeconomics, which plays in the meantime already a very important role at our university. So having said that, I hope you all have a wonderful and interesting evening, and I'd like to hand over to the discussion leader of tonight's evening, Mr. Jülich, and he will introduce the other panelists.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lang. Good evening. My name is Niklas Jülich. I'm a journalist at Die Presse. There was a time when I wrote about other stuff than Bitcoin, but that is a long time ago. I've been in this place once before. That was about 6 months ago, not even, I think in December, when the Research Institute for Cryptoeconomics was launched here at the WU. Back then, the prices for cryptocurrencies were skyrocketing, and of course there was lots of enthusiasm and many people attended. I have to say I'm extremely impressed. We have 950 people here today. I don't even know how many people are going to watch the live stream online. There's also, I was told to say, the live stream can also be watched in the Festsaal 1 right around the corner if you cannot find a spot to sit. We're going to hear 3 very important keynotes tonight, 2 regarding the cryptoeconomic side, 1 regarding blockchain as a business model, as a business use case from a gentleman from Microsoft Austria. Afterwards, we are going to sit down here, have a little chat, and then, of course, the most important part of the evening is we're going to open the floor for questions from the audience. Without further ado, I'd like to just give a quick introduction to the speakers. Then I'm going to disappear. Then the speakers are going to come up, and afterwards we're going to have our discussion. Opening the evening for the keynote is Shermin Woshemgir. She is the director of the Research Institute for Cryptoeconomics here at the WU Wien. She's also the founder of the Blockchain Hub in Berlin. Second speaker is going to be Hermann Erlach. He's a member of the executive board of Microsoft Austria and their digital transformation lead. And last but not least, Guido Schäfer, member of the Department of Economics here at the WU, and also a member of the Institute, let's say the right word, Research Institute for Cryptoeconomics here at the WU. Mrs. Woschengier, please.
Hello and welcome. I'm very happy to be here tonight. Just checking if I actually didn't check. If I switch, will I get to my... Yes. Very happy to be here tonight, and impressed by the number of people who have shown up in spite of these temperatures. So we'll try to keep it short and simple and have enough time for the discussion. If we talk about Bitcoin, blockchain, and cryptocurrencies today, it seems that there is a lot of misinformation, it seems like a buzzword all around, but what is it really about? I'd like to introduce by saying Bitcoin is not a currency, at least not a currency in the contemporary sense of fiat currencies that we use today, euro, dollar, etc. However, it does have some currency similarities to currencies as we know it, and we'll get into details. But Bitcoin really is, and the blockchain technology behind it, it's much more than just a currency. So Bitcoin, on one hand, in my opinion, it's an operating system for a new way for society to organize itself across jurisdictions in a distributed way. Bitcoin and the blockchain behind it, on the other hand, is also brought us a transparent bookkeeping tool with which we can now do peer-to-peer transactions, and it's a payment settlement layer via this transparent distributed bookkeeping tool. On the other hand, it's a governance machine. All rules of who is allowed to do when and what are in the code, and this code is automatically enforced if a majority of the computers thinks that the transaction is correct. So in that sense, it's also a governance tool. And last but not least, it's also more than a currency, a completely new type of asset class, and we'll look at the details why. So in order to understand how Bitcoin works, and we reduce Bitcoin to a currency, but it really is this. It's a paradigm shift. It's a paradigm shift from the world we live in today to a distributed world. What do I mean by that? The world we live in today is organized more or less in this pyramid scheme. Not pyramid scheme, in this pyramid way that we see on the left hand. All our institutions, small or big, private or public, for-profit or non-profit, are more or less organized in a top-down way. We have top-down organizational structures. There is one legal entity, so we know who to sue or who is accountable for that organization. And this legal entity has legal contracts with all its agents. So either in the form of employment contracts, or if it interacts with other organizations, it will have some kind of interinstitutional agreements, and everything is based on legal contracts. Now, Bitcoin is a very, very different playing field. Bitcoin is that thing on the right-hand side where we have a decentralized autonomous organization. What does it mean? It does not have a centralized institution. There is no one single legal entity that can be that is accountable for anything. All the rules of the transactions are in the code. The code is transparent. Any computer or any person owning a computer can download the code and start participating in the Bitcoin network. So it's permissionless. No centralized institution gives you permission of whether you can participate or not participate. And you have different network actors that have different roles and are incentivized and disincentivized by the crypto governance rules that are embedded in the code and tied to the token. So Bitcoin could be seen as the native token of the distributed internet tribe called the Bitcoin network. And the monetary policy is defined in the code of that token, when and how much of that coin is generated under which circumstance. How does this work? The underlying blockchain technology of Bitcoin is based on 3 technologies, basically, that interact with each other. The idea of peer-to-peer networks. Every computer has the same information of who did what and when in the network. Cryptography is very important to maintain transparency while guaranteeing the privacy of the individual actors. We want to know who had how much Bitcoin and when, but we don't need to know the personal identity of the person. Therefore, we need cryptography to guarantee privacy while maintaining that level of transparency. And then, how do we guarantee that all network actors will all perform according to the rules? And this is why we need the economic incentives. By giving money to network actors for, in the case of Bitcoin, verifying Bitcoin transactions in a truthful way, we make it really, really, really expensive to manipulate the network. So when we talk about Bitcoin being safe, that's not actually true. No system is 100% safe, but the cryptoeconomic incentive design based on complex game theory is designed in a way where even if a majority of the network actors become corrupt, the system is still integer. So yes, you can manipulate the network, but it's very, very, very expensive. And how expensive it is, you can go, there are websites today where you can see how much money you would need to invest in order to corrupt the Bitcoin network. Today, I looked it up before coming here, it's almost $7 billion US only in hardware, given the cheapest hardware costs. And you need maybe $5 million daily electricity costs to manipulate one transaction. Okay, so what is Bitcoin, not the network, but this, what we call currency, the token? What is it really? Is it a currency? So yes, in a way, I think it's a currency. It's this highly liquid store of value that can be transferred peer-to-peer via the network. In that sense, it has some currency-similar functions. In another sense, it is the fuel of the network or the commodity of the network, because you need Bitcoin to pay for peer-to-peer remittances. You need the commodity of the network to be able to conduct a transaction within the network. In Ethereum, another blockchain, you need Ether, the commodity of the Ethereum network, to pay for computing power, for decentralized computing power. And in the SIA network, you need the native commodity, the SIA token, to pay for decentralized file storage, peer-to-peer file storage. So in that sense, I think it has a utility function, aka a commodity function. And as you can see, I'm struggling with words. And the biggest problem is that we're trying to explain a phenomena, a completely new thing, with words of the old world. And the biggest challenge is to find the right terminology of what we're describing. The third function for Bitcoin would be it has speculative function. Not the speculation of buying and selling at the market, but more or less this network aspect rather than a speculation aspect. The more people participate in the network, the more people perform good work for the network, the more the network will be worth, the more demand for the network token, and also the more expensive it will be to manipulate the network. So you have this speculative network effect thing tied to the token. Okay, so Bitcoin was just the beginning, 9 years ago, when the white paper was written. It's been live for over 8 years, and it was open source, so anyone could take the token, not the token, the code, because it was open source, modify it, and do their better, faster, more anonymous version of Bitcoin. And we now have hundreds of alternative cryptocurrencies that try to do a derivative of Bitcoin with different type of cryptography, with faster transaction times, etc., etc. Then something else came along called Ethereum 3 years ago. Ethereum said, well, Bitcoin and the underlying blockchain technology is a very good idea, but the problem with Bitcoin, it has only one smart contract that guarantees peer-to-peer remittance without the middleman, and that's great. But what if we decouple the smart contract layer from the protocol layer so we can have any type of peer-to-peer transaction without the middleman, peer-to-peer file storage or peer-to-peer ride sharing, peer-to-peer apartment sharing, peer-to-peer energy trading. So Ethereum made it really easy with a few lines of code, programming a smart contract that runs on this distributed world computer called Ethereum network to A, create your own token with a few lines of code, and B, do this thing called an ICO, initial coin offering. Basically, ICO started because Ethereum allowed peer-to-peer fundraising with a simple smart contract, where you come up with an idea, you say that I'm issuing my Sherman token, a Red Hat token, for example, and whoever wants to invest into this Red Hat token needs to pay me 0.1 Bitcoin. And the function of the Red Hat token is whatever. And I can do that. The question is whether you believe me that the Red Hat token makes sense. But I can raise funds today, peer-to-peer, without a bank, without a traditional VC, over a simple smart contract that runs on the Ethereum blockchain. And so we've seen a lot of new projects raising funds for their tokens. But what do these tokens do? And I'm going to skip that. Yes, how many funds? Like last year alone, $4 billion US, different cryptocurrency projects, ICOs raised $4 billion US in cryptocurrencies for various projects. This year we've already surpassed it, and we're just in June. And I think EOS just closed the round, the funding round. EOS alone raised $4 billion for one project. So this is not a fantasy, this is not the future, it's already happening, but the future hasn't arrived everywhere yet, but it's already happening. If you go on CoinMarketCap today, we have over 1,600 so-called cryptocurrencies. I don't like to call them cryptocurrencies because most of them are not designed to be a currency, not even designed to be something similar to Bitcoin. A lot of these tokens are designed, have been issued on the Ethereum blockchain, and they can be anything. So some of these tokens actually are native blockchain tokens, like Bitcoin, like Ether, like Zcash. They're native blockchain tokens that incentivize, where governance rules like kind of determine the utility function, but also kind of the monetary policy, and they govern a distributed network. Ethereum made it easy to create a token that can represent anything. So on an application tokens that were generated on Ethereum or similar blockchains, we can have usage tokens that have some kind of similar design of governing a distributed tribe. And we had that a few years ago with the DAO. It was supposed to be a decentralized investment fund without fund managers, and it was an application token on top of the Ethereum blockchain. It had crypto governance, very sophisticated crypto governance. But most of the tokens that are issued nowadays are application tokens that are some kind of asset-backed token or have some shady kind of utility function, and nobody knows what they really do because nobody knows how to design these things. The asset-backed tokens could be backed by a physical good, like gold, like petrol, but also they could represent a share in a company, they could represent a ticket to a concert, they really could represent anything you want. So we have too little education of what these tokens are. And very often, they even have hybrid functions, as in the case of Bitcoin itself, for example. So when we talk about what types of tokens, we get into a taxonomy problem. It's like depending on what perspective you use. If you use a legal perspective, you have to ask yourself, is it a currency? Is it a share in a company? Or is it a commodity? But if you look at on a technical layer, you have to ask yourself, is it a native blockchain token? Is it an application token? If you look from a utility function, you can see if it's a work token or a usage token. And very often, as I said, the answers are hybrid. So, to cut a long story short, I think that these tokens, these cryptographic tokens, these crypto assets, we cannot define them in a very, it depends, we have to differentiate which token we talk about to define what they actually are. And in many cases, their function oscillates somewhere between currency, commodity, utility, and security. Some are easier to define, and some are really not easy to define, and some are really poorly designed. I fear that a lot of the tokens that were issued last year over ICOs have such poor design, they will collapse soon. Wrapping it up is Bitcoin money, and we will hear more from Guido a bit later. In my opinion, that's my personal opinion, it has similarities to money, but not to, as I said, fiat currencies. If we compare it to money, the only way to compare it to money is to compare it to commodity money that we used to have. And why am I saying that? Because, as I said, Ethereum is kind of the internal commodity of the Ethereum network. Bitcoin is also, you pay for transactions in the Bitcoin network, but also because of its nature of decentralized production. There is no centralized institution producing this token, at least on the native blockchain level. Application tokens, very different thing. Another reason why I think it has more similarities to commodities is because the price is determined by the market and there is no centralized intervention. But as I said, it has similarities. I don't think it is commodity money. But as opposed to commodity money, and because of the nature of the token and because of the low transaction cost of peer-to-peer trading, it's highly divisible and is much more liquid than traditional commodities. And we will see what kind of effect this could have, especially given the fact that today we're already experimenting with atomic swaps, etc. Talking of which, the reason why Bitcoin is not money, and we will hear about this later, is or not fiat money in the contemporary sense, is because the price is not stable, and the currencies we use today are the price is stabilized, so we can have be sure that the money we make today or the money invested today as individuals, but also as business entities, that we can be sure that we have the same amount of money today when we make investment decisions for tomorrow. And because the price is not stable, it's really hard to compare it to currencies. However, I would like to conclude here, in the blockchain community, people are already experimenting with the concepts like stable coins to fight this thing. They're already, obviously you can use hedging instruments to fight price fluctuations, and atomic swaps will bring some new aspects to liquidity once we get there, and then the question is, what is money? But I think that's probably a question for a different day. I would like to conclude by saying we only just started, as Vice-Rector Lang just said. We only just started with the Cryptoeconomics Research Institute. We have 30 researchers from 6 different departments: lawyers, economists, business people, software developers, cryptographers, working together, and I think we will have some very interesting output, hopefully, down the line. You can follow us on our website, on social media, and see what we're doing, and I hope to be doing much more soon, and without further ado, I would like to pass on to the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, good evening also from my side. It's great that I'm able to speak in front of you, but I have to admit I'm not a researcher. Yeah? So I'm representing Microsoft here, and Microsoft is of course a technology company, it's a platform company, and we are very deep in the industry use cases of the blockchain. We are very deep in social use cases of the blockchain, and of course we are driving standardization and we are applying different flavors of the blockchain. I will come back to that later with our customers. So after a very precise introduction from Charmaine, I think there's no need to introduce once again the generic concept of the blockchain. Yeah? We are talking about permissionless systems, we are talking about secure concepts, we are talking about shared informations, we are talking about a centralized or more or less decentralized database where you are not able to delete anything, so it's super secure, and there are a lot of business applications for this technology. It's not so much a technology, it's more or less an approach. Like digital transformation in general, you might think it's about technology. And you might think that Microsoft is dealing a lot with the technology and with bits and bytes, but we also see in our customer base, we see that it's more digital transformation. Also the concept of blockchain is very much about technology, yeah, technical capabilities, but it's also about methodological capabilities, and it's also a lot about change management, yeah? And it's also a lot about leadership to apply these concepts, especially within industries. So hopefully within the next 5 to 10 minutes, I will give you some examples where we do apply this approach, this technology to our customers. As mentioned before, Microsoft is not so much focused on cryptocurrencies in general. We are very much focused on the application of the blockchain to industry use cases. And we will have a super discussion afterwards because I'm just coming from a customer event and there's a very emotional discussion around cryptocurrencies. Yeah? I think this is a very mature environment because the majority of you are dealing with the concepts and you're very deep into the topic. I'm just coming from a different customer event, and there you can see, like always in Austria, I'm an Austrian guy, so there is a lot of negative perception of what is going on in the area of cryptocurrency, and sometimes it feels really strange because they don't see the potential. Yeah? We don't see the chances. We are afraid of applying these concepts here in Austria, and so I really want to encourage you and also the entire Austrian society to see the positive things which we can do with this technology and with this approach. And I see that more and more institutions, customers are discussing this approach in general. Also here in Austria, it's now picking up. Yes, it's a hype. Yeah? There is no clear definition. If you are not a researcher, you might be confused by some messages coming from different parties, but the topic blockchain is here in Austria and it's getting maturity. Some of you might know, and this is a perfect use case for my introduction, that one of the biggest problems and biggest challenges worldwide is authentication, is having a clear identity. So a lot of guys are not able worldwide to have a secure identity. So we are doing at the moment a project together with partners to change this situation significantly, and we are applying the blockchain concept here. So let's roll a short video.
I'm Fabiola. I am a student.
I am a princess.
I am Zhao. I am a scientist.
I am a teacher. I am...
Can you show me some identification?
No, my house was completely destroyed. I just ran.
You will need some ID to cross the border.
I've got nothing on me. What can I do?
I'm a father.
I'm trying to find my family. Please, I'm scared.
Hi, how can I help you?
My child needs to be vaccinated.
Okay, can I get your name?
I am Nia.
And your date of birth?
I don't know my date of birth. I don't have a birth certificate.
Don't you have any form of ID? I'm sorry, Nia, we need something that proves who you are and where you were born.
Can you please help me? I'm here on holidays, but I've lost my passport and my flight leaves tomorrow.
That will take some time to process.
But I need to get back. Family emergency. What can I do?
Can I get your name?
Can you show me some identification?
Don't you have any form of ID?
Please help me.
What if your identity was always in your hands? An identity you can trust, that others can trust? What if this digital identity was always at your fingertips, and people could verify your identity in a few simple steps? What if you were in control of your data and how it's shared with others? What if this personal, portable identity helped you to learn, work, and live? What if showing who you are was as easy as saying, I am?
I am Yosef.
Across the globe, the pieces are coming together to make this happen. Accenture, Microsoft, and...
This is the advertising stuff, so I will leave it here. But here you can see this is a potential application, and this is really a great use case. Has a lot to do with technology, but has also a lot to do with change management, and also, of course, to find a governance model worldwide for this approach. You can imagine this is really, you need a lot of power and a lot of change management in order to introduce such a concept. You might be familiar with other use cases. For example, land registry, also a worldwide problem that you're not able to have a secure ID for your property transactions. Yeah? There's a lot of fraud going on worldwide in that area, so several countries, Sweden, Honduras, Estonia, have started to work on blockchain use cases, how to improve this situation. Imagine the next case, it's very famous, it's more or less a connected vehicle, connected car use case. Who has bought a used car in the past? Not a new one, a used one. Yeah? Then you might know that there is a challenge here because you need trust. If you buy a car and you see 20,000 kilometers on the screen, then you need trust that this car has only 20,000 kilometers and not 100,000. There's a lot of things you can do to manipulate it. And there are other things like maintenance cycles, whatever. Just imagine having the car in one blockchain. Then everybody can access this car and you can be 100% sure what is the actual status of this car, what's the history of this car. So this is also a potential application, very powerful use case for blockchain technology. Web chat, for example, it's about booking discrepancies between systems. We are applying smart contracts here to improve these processes. Banking, you might be familiar with the overall discussion in banking about cryptocurrency, what is the role of the banking system, what is the role of the governance, but we are also applying blockchain concepts to improve core banking procedures, yeah, to make them faster and to make it even more reliable. There is another use case in the logistics area dealing with marine insurance. I've just checked it out a couple of weeks ago together with the customer. There's enormous complexity in these insurance logistics procedures. Yeah? You can reduce complexity enormously here. And the last one, sustainable supply chain, also very, very interesting. Yeah? Nestle is applying blockchain technology to give information to their customers. Where are the goods from originally, and what is the supply chain of these goods? Where are these goods coming from? Also a very powerful use case applying blockchain technology. All these use cases, they use different flavors of blockchains. for example, we've heard before that the blockchain in general is permissionless. Yeah? You can imagine within industries, and in order to optimize procedures and processes within industry use cases, you need to be fast. Yeah? So you need different governance models here, and you need to have some sort of, it's not very precise, but you need smaller and lighter blockchains, but you can still apply concepts of the blockchains here. And of course, you have to bring several parties together to work on one standardized platform with the blockchain concept in order to approve these processes. And the industry now sees the power of these concepts. And of course, we do need a lot of research in that area, yeah? Because we are not there. The concept is still evolving. There are different standards. There are different parties involved. But only with these clear use cases, the industry can see the power of this concept. Yeah? What this really can do for the society, for companies, and for NGO organizations. So, Microsoft is a technology company, and you are aware of the fact that technology these days is moving super fast. Yeah? Artificial intelligence, blockchain concepts, cloud calculation power. So we really struggle, and we see in every single country that we struggle with the speed of technology, because we can see that the regulations, the legislation, is not able to deal with this enormous speed of technology evolving. So we can see that there are a lot of political, social, humanitarian, legal and ethical questions we still have to address, and we need, this is my personal point of view, let's really leverage the power of these new concepts, the power of this new technology, but let's also make sure that we have some sort of security and trust, yeah, in these innovation topics. What do I mean by that? I think we are if we are discussing, and we will discuss it afterwards, very simplified, what is the role of the state dealing with all these cryptocurrencies? Yeah? What is the role of the national bank? Then I think we are in a very luxury situation here in Austria, because there is still a lot of trust in these institutions. Yeah? As an Austrian, you still have a lot of trust in these regulators, in all these parties involved. In other countries, it's totally different. And especially here, the power of the blockchain, of this concept, is super powerful. It was more or less my intro statement. Yes, it's technology, but it's far more than technology. It's a business and a society revolution. And if we keep a positive mindset towards this technology change, towards these new options, new capabilities, then we will significantly improve the situation in Austria in the future, and we will see really strange and very powerful things happen in the future. Thank you very much.
Vielleicht könnte man relativ am Anfang eine Frage, was der Unterschied zwischen dieser Non-Permission und Permission.
I'm now going to present an economist's point of view on those topics. So let's see. I would argue that the crypto movement has got many different faces. You can look at crypto technology as a radically new technological innovation. So this is the technical side of things. It's potentially a big new business opportunity, as we've just heard. But also my experience in the classroom with students is that it's also a youth movement, right? You could say it's a kind of movement where young people who are technologically skilled decide to challenge the establishment. And I think this is interesting, 50 years after the Summer of Love, that some of you might remember here, others probably not, to talk also about this aspect, right? So there are powerful ideas behind that movement, such as decentralized power, give the power back to the people, thereby increase personal freedom. You could say, let's use technology to create a system that is fair and works for everybody. It's probably not by coincidence that Bitcoin was created in the midst of the world financial crisis in 2008. Challenge big money, right? We've heard about disintermediation. Why do we need banks if we can do this in a peer-to-peer structure without a central party that is actually making a lot of money in the process? Build communities going beyond nationality, going beyond gender, right? So, for example, Bitcoin you can use basically everywhere in the world if you can just turn out a computer there and get on the web. So I think these are very powerful ideas, and this explains also some of the drive of this movement. I think some of these ideas might also be quite dangerous, so I think a lot of reflection is needed, and this is what a university is also supposed to provide here. Now, I'm a monetary economist, so I'm going to focus now on the question of money, where, of course, the idea of everybody creating his or her own money, like the Sherman coin or others, that's certainly an interesting proposition. Now, to be clear on that, if you ask me whether cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin are money, my answer is very clear. So I would say no, it's not money. Now, why that? Well, in monetary economics, basically, you define money by what money does, by its functions, right? And there are 4 basic functions people talk about, existing cryptocurrencies, in my opinion, do not fulfill those functions to a sufficiently high degree. So they are not a generally accepted medium of exchange. You cannot go out to most shops and just pay by using some cryptocurrency. It's not a stable store of value, what money normally is supposed to be, but it's fluctuating a lot, so it's not something where you can, in a secure manner, store value. It's not a unit of account. If you looked at Sherman's presentation, even the crypto people provide numbers when they talk about how much money has been raised in an ICO by talking about dollars or euros, right? So they could also talk about satoshis or bitcoins, but they don't, right? And the reason is nobody has really a good feeling for what a satoshi is worth, really, and it changes every day quite a bit. And it's not legal tender, right? So the legal function which the legal system gives to such currencies is also not fulfilled, right? So as a matter of fact, if you look at the basic functions money in a conventional sense is supposed to fulfill, then this is not money. I think the more interesting question is, so can it ever become money? Because this is just a snapshot of what is happening right now, but it could change, right? Now let's think about the first function, the medium of exchange function. So wouldn't it be possible if more and more shops, let's say, are going to accept cryptocurrencies, that one day it's going to rise to the status of a regular currency? And here, my answer would again be no, right? So the idea that you have got many, many different currencies, everybody his or her own coin, that's against the basic notion of what money is supposed to deliver, right? When you've got money, you want to make sure that you get back value in exchange, and you do not want to verify each time, what's the creditworthiness of your counterparty. You do not want to deal all the time with strongly fluctuating values of what you get back, right? So it's very inconvenient and would incur a lot of transaction costs to deal with this multitude of monies. I mean, just remember the time, some of you do remember, when Europe had many different currencies. It was very inconvenient just to travel between countries. Now we are talking about like hundreds or thousands, potentially, different coins, where it's very hard to do transactions, right? What about the store of value function? So here I would argue that as soon as you're going to trade those currencies, those tokens, in financial markets, you will get volatility. I mean, that's the experience we have. In foreign exchange, we talk about overshooting of exchange rates because there is so much volatility there. When we talk about stock markets, for example, we talk about excess volatility there, right? So there's a big debate in economic research what is behind this huge amount of volatility in financial markets. And so I think as soon as you put it on financial markets, you will have volatility. And even if Bitcoin should ever become as stable as real gold, right, which some people think might be the case, this would still be way too volatile to serve as money. Right? Money needs to be something very stable where people have an idea what value is expressed in those units of money. And if you trade those currencies in a financial market kind of context, you will get the volatility and it won't go away. Unit of account, so this is closely related. If you want to express the value of a good in monetary terms, it needs to be stable. If it keeps changing all the time, you don't really know what it's worth. Right? Just as we said before, when you talk about how much money has been raised in an ICO, we talk about dollar figures or euro figures, right? Because in other currencies, we have no clear idea of how much this would actually be. And so all the economic calculations, cost calculation, all these kinds of things, what am I going to buy, all these things have to rely on a meaningful price system that is based upon a stable currency. And finally, legal tender, well, what we have experienced this year is that it's rather going to, well, there is a danger of at least some cryptocurrencies becoming illegal tender, right? So there has been a backlash underway where some of the major policymakers from the IMF, from the Bank for International Settlements, from national central banks, have strongly spoken against the rise of such currencies, right? And I think one should take those opinions very seriously, as these are the big players in this game, and they can change the rule as you go along. So these were like more microeconomic aspects of money. Let's briefly talk about one of the most important macroeconomic aspects, I would say. How would crypto monetary policy work? Here again, my argument is it would not work. Why is that? Well, typically, when we have such a cryptocurrency, there is a monetary policy built into those protocols. Meaning, for example, in the case of Bitcoin, we know that there is a deterministic path how many Bitcoins will be created in the future, and at some point it will level off, and then there will be a fixed amount and not more will be created. And so in that sense, you could say there is a kind of money growth rule there, right? Each year is going to grow by a certain percentage. Now, this is interesting for a monetary economist because basically such money growth rules were debated in the 1970s, 1980s. So it's very old research we're actually talking about here. It has also been tried in practice, by the way, in the early 1980s. And as it turned out, it did not work at all. Very quickly, central banks abandoned the concept of money growth rules. And the reason is that for such a rule to work, you need to have a very stable economic system, a very stable financial system. Then you can calibrate or try to calibrate the rule such as to fit that system. If that system changes very quickly, and this is what we have, right? Our economy, our financial system is changing all the time, then you will not find any rule that works well for a longer amount of time. This becomes most obvious probably as we talk about financial crises, right? In a financial crisis, the point is that a central bank has to respond in a very flexible manner to all the circumstances nobody can foresee normally, and has to act as a so-called lender of last resort, which means it's going to provide liquidity to institutions that are cash-strapped, right? And that would collapse without this critical support by the central bank, okay? And so in that sense, you cannot build the role of a lender of last resort into such a cryptocurrency system, okay? And if you don't have a lender of last resort, then you get a meltdown of the financial system, and some of the biggest economic crises in recent history, such as the Great Depression, where about a third of the US banking system went under because there was no such lender of last resort that effectively was taking on this role. And so in that sense, the bottom line is any policy rule in such a crypto system would lead to an inadequate liquidity provision to the economy, and hence could not be stable. It would simply not work. But is that important for the future of cryptoeconomics? I would argue no. So if you put the question positively, is there a future for cryptoeconomics, then my answer would be definitely yes. So I don't think that the future of the crypto economy is going to depend big time on the question whether it's going to replace conventional money at some point in the future. I think that's not really a very important question. There are other issues, because just as Shermin said, a crypto token can represent so many different things, far beyond the question of being a medium of exchange or a store of value or anything like that, right? And so I think in that respect, and here, I mean, I'm not an expert because I'm not an engineer, but I find it very convincing, and also we saw this in Mr. Erdach's presentation, that potentially, of course, there are many very interesting applications for blockchain technology, distributed ledger technology, and things like that, okay? As a student of technical innovation, we know that most of those projects will fail. Right, so like, I don't know, 90%, more than 90% of existing projects today are going to go under, right? The problem is we just don't know which will be the ones that are going to be successful and that will survive, okay? And so I think really the point is about building sustainable value, right? The measure of success for a crypto system is not how much money you have raked in your ICO. I mean, this might be an interesting aspect for the people doing the ICO, but really the question is, so is this value that we are going to create and that is sustainable in the future? So I think this is an interesting issue here. And so those projects that are going to survive are going to carve out niches in the old world, right? And it could be, of course, that these niches grow big, right? So there might be very successful applications as we go along. It will be like an evolutionary process. So I don't know what is going to survive there, right? But I'm pretty sure that there will be interesting things surviving. And I do believe, and now this brings me back to the starting question, that what we call cryptocurrencies, which is something new, here I would fully agree to what Shermin has said, they will have some role within this crypto universe, right? So I do think that in the future, what we will get is coexistence between the old systems and the new. And I think there are many very interesting questions about how this coexistence really will play out, right? So there are many, of course, many potential tensions, but also many ways how systems can actually complement each other, right? But figuring this out, I think, is going to be an interesting process, and I hope also that our research institute is going to contribute a little bit to that. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schäfer. Let me just... Okay, bye-bye. Obviously, we cannot cover all bases tonight because, as we've seen in the speeches, it's a lot of bases, and it's a big topic. There is many directions we can go. Let's maybe stick with the main topic of the talk tonight. That was also, you know, on the invitations and why people attended. So, how much of a threat? And let's just keep it with Bitcoin, okay? How much of a threat is this system to the way we understand money today? We understand currencies today. Do central banks, you know, they're already called central banks, and then there's this decentralized alternative. Do they have to change anything? Are they going to fight it? What's your view on that?
I mean, I do think that, of course, potentially, should this really take off, right, it's going to challenge monetary and fiscal sovereignty of governments, right? So this is why everybody is so nervous in the policy sphere about the future of those systems. So, I mean, the point is that if you can do transactions anonymously, right, you're not probably going to declare this to the tax authorities, right? If money is created outside the conventional monetary system, at some point, as this grows, you will lose control over the monetary system, right? So I think potentially, should it take off, there are issues here. Now, I mean, I've tried to provide some reasons why I don't think that it's going to replace currencies such as the dollar. But I do agree to what you said, that probably the perspective is quite different if you are coming from a country with an unstable financial system, right? So, I mean, there, of course, potentially...
But it's a question of definition, what is unstable?
Yeah, okay, I agree, right? But, I mean, I think from there, it's a different perspective, right? And at least temporarily, I can well imagine that people are going to rely on those alternative forms.
So, in Venezuela, for example, the volatility of the local currency was higher than Bitcoin, and this is why people started using Bitcoin before it started to become forbidden. And maybe this is also one of the reasons that Venezuela is now talking about petro token, etc. It's just an asset-backed token, but there it's actually it has arrived in the reality of day-to-day people because the volatility was lower.
But isn't it bizarre saying that Venezuela is too stupid to manage a currency, and then saying, but now they have their own cryptocurrency, and that's cool?
Well, I didn't use the word stupid. That was your interpretation.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's pretty obvious.
Well, I don't. That's maybe more due to corruption more than stupidity, from what I understand. Yes, in a way, it's contradictory, but this is why it's so interesting. So, Bitcoin, blockchain, and beyond seem to be this Trojan horse of transformation. I mean, when you look at Bitcoin, it was created by a bunch of crypto anarchists, or at least created, I don't know, but definitely promoted by because we don't know who Satoshi is. For all we know, it could be a result of some, intelligence agencies creating that and putting it online. But the people who then created the code and deployed the code and promoted it, the early adopters of Bitcoin were crypto anarchists. And then 3 years ago, banks started promoting that technology, or a derivative of that technology. And maybe we should talk about permission and permissionless.
Yes, we will get there. Yes, we will get there. But I do have to pose one very small question to Mr. Schäfer, because you had this part on your presentation where you said governments are going to fight, the loss of monetary sovereignty, the loss of fiscal sovereignty. But isn't this something that European governments already lost? That's the whole idea of the euro, right? We already lost our fiscal and our monetary sovereignty.
Yes, but we have kind of shifted it to the European level to some degree, right? So, I mean, it's a different governance structure now, but I think in qualitative terms, it's very different from what would happen if really all those systems went crypto, right? So I think this would be a loss of control. I mean, now there are, of course, many issues about it, right? Because we know these systems work in a decentralized manner, right? So there is no central switch you can turn off and then the system is gone. So I do think that there are certainly very serious issues about also the freedom of the internet and things like that, right? But I mean, so overall, yeah, I'm very sure that, and I mean, actually, we have seen that, for example, the Dutch central bank has been experimenting with exactly blockchain type of technologies, right? So I think should it really get bigger, then central banks themselves would come out with their own versions of that. And I think this would be another serious competitor. I mean, the basic idea that you've got a digital asset which you can directly transfer between agents on the web, I think that's a very powerful idea, right? So,
and like you said, peaceful coexistence is possible. We don't have to, decide for one or the other.
It's necessary.
Right? It already happens, right? Mr. Erlach, you told us about you just came from an event with customers. So, and Microsoft wants to, use the blockchain, the technology, the idea, for lots of different things. But I'd like to know, tell us more about how the Austrians, the business community reacts to the whole idea, and what do they say? Do they think you want to sell them bitcoins?
The Austrians?
Yeah, well, the people you talk to.
No, not this. I think we have to distinguish between very well-educated guys, and I'm not talking about researchers, and middle management within big companies in Austria. Yeah? We are in discussion with a lot of different banks, and maybe you've seen the saying on my slides, the saying from Mahatma Gandhi that first they laugh at you, yeah, then they're gonna ignore you, then they fight you, and then you win. Yeah? And this is more or less the situation now. I think in the industry, there are different use cases. They are not so much interested in the cryptocurrency topic in general, yeah, because it's an expert topic these days, and it's getting maturity. But they are really interested in the concept overall of blockchain, because it can really solve a lot of issues, yeah, and a lot of business challenges.
And what we do need to talk about is the definition of a blockchain, and what exactly are the differences between what we know from Bitcoin and what you are talking about, Shermin?
Yes, so everything started with the blockchain behind Bitcoin is a permissionless blockchain. It's actually some blockchain fundamentalists or early Bitcoiners would say that's the only blockchain. If it's permissionless, it's really a blockchain, because then it needs a token that incentivizes network actors to behave in a certain manner, because these agents or the network actors do not know each other, they don't trust each other. They don't even have binding legal agreements with each other, and they live in different jurisdictions. So the only thing to make sure that everyone runs in the same direction is putting the rules into a transparent code and incentivizing people with money to do the right thing. So the token is an integral part of how a distributed system is incentivized and the security is maintained. A lot of the solutions that you were talking about can also be resolved with what we today call federated blockchains, or non-permissioned distributed ledger technologies, where you have a federation of actors, a consortium of banks along the supply chain of players. They know each other, they trust each other because they have legal contracts with each other. And only members of that federation can validate transactions. In that case, you do not need a token. Yep. It is a block, it's a distributed ledger, it doesn't have a token. It doesn't need at least a native token to incentivize transactions. However, you could transfer digital cryptographic assets over, but it doesn't need a token. I think when we talk about blockchain today, we need to understand what type of blockchain solution we're talking about. So.
We are also developing standards for industry blockchain scenarios, and this is also in some areas we are moving away from the original blockchain concepts, because there is some sort of platform behind it. Yeah? So you're applying it simplified, you're applying the blockchain concept on a platform, and this is a little bit against the original decentralized concept of the blockchain, yeah? But it speeds up some scenarios, and if you have 4 parties within a complex supply chain, they more or less agree to these rules on this platform, and you can apply this blockchain concept.
And there's nothing wrong with using this technology to have a more friction, less friction in business, right? Yeah. Is it possible that some of these use cases, some of these standards will move to permissionless blockchains, maybe even the Bitcoin blockchain? Because when you really look into what people are thinking about doing with the Bitcoin or Ethereum blockchain, it's pretty crazy.
Yes, I think it might be a transition, might be. I think we will live in an internet of blockchains. There is no one blockchain solution to rule them all. However, I do think that the federated chain solutions that we have, it's for several reasons. A, companies don't like to give control out of their hand. I mean, we saw it in the early internet. Companies had intranets. Nobody has an intranet. We just have a good firewall. Well, you do have very, very limited institutions like security agencies. They do have their own internet. But normal companies and normal institutions just are connected to the internet, and they have a good firewall. So it might be that this is just a temporary phenomenon. But it's also important not only because companies still have their old mindset of trust, but they're also highly regulated industries. The banking industry is highly regulated, the identity industry, the insurance industry, etc., etc. Even the, what is it called, energy industry. So we can have microgrids today and peer-to-peer energy trading. That is already possible technically, but because these industries are regulated by national law, you cannot provide these solutions yet in a permissionless systems. Maybe down the line in 10 years, when we have more robust networks, when we have robust solutions, and when we have regulatory answers, which we do not have today, regulators really don't know how to regulate this thing.
But it's better if, as long as they don't know what to do, it's better than do nothing, right?
Not always, honestly, because we're talking, I come from Berlin, where we worked with a lot of blockchain startups, and I was member of the DAO, one of the curators, and I mean, people like me and Christoph Jentsch and all these people were like, we didn't know if we were doing something illegal or not. So as somebody, as a founder, you want to have certainty. And this is why many people are going to, for example, Zug or Delaware, because there they have more legal certainty. And you don't, especially when you have children, you don't want to be risking being maybe going to jail. So it's not only, we have the absurd situation that regulators are not regulating because they don't want to regulate it in a wrong way. And actually, entrepreneurs are asking for regulation because they cannot start building their projects. Their bank accounts are being freezed on a regular basis. So you cannot pay your rent because your bank account is being freezed. And this is a real problem. A lot of entrepreneurs here can tell you this.
Mr. Schäfer, regulatory environment. Where do we stand in Austria when it comes to cryptocurrencies, to Bitcoin? Are we, you know, because people tell me, yes, I can use it, but it's still a hassle, right? And then today I think the ING Bank, they had a study with rich people, like 500,000 euros plus. And 14% of Austrians, 500,000 euros and plus, already have experience with cryptocurrencies. So how does this work?
Yeah, well, I think that's a very important question. So I also do very much believe that the crypto movement has to make peace with the legal system. Otherwise, this is never going to go mainstream, right? I mean, I think the basic approach of regulators until now has been that they tried to bring these new things, these new structures, first under existing systems, right? And have to find out there the hard way that sometimes that works, right? Sometimes a token can be similar to a share in a company, so to speak, but very often it's something else, right? But I think, the consequence of that is that we need, certainly on the one hand, think to what degree existing rules can be meaningfully applied. But I think given that it's really something new, we need new rules for that, right? And the question how they are going to be designed, I think will be critical for the prospects of development of this new field, right? So I think, so the basic approach of regulators is to say, let's just take the existing rules and thereby we're going to fix it. I think this is not going to work well.
But don't you think it's already mainstream? Because you said it's never going to go mainstream, and there's 900 people sitting here talking, listening to us talk about this. I mean, this is pretty mainstream, right? We're not in an underground, under the bridge somewhere, right? Not dealing in bitcoins.
Right. I mean, yeah, I could tell you about zillions others who are not sitting here, right? So I think it's a matter of perspective. So I think it certainly has grown, right? So that's definitely true.
Okay.
Well, I think mainstream interest is growing, for sure, as we can see, but it hasn't reached like mainstream application level. It hasn't reached the mainstream yet. Why? Because it's a back-end revolution, right? So the web was the Web 2 was a front-end revolution. It made it allowed us to have more sophisticated application on top of the internet and all these, you know, Facebooks, etc. It was a front-end revolution, the smartphones and the apps and everything. Blockchain is a back-end revolution and its early stages. So most of the research and development has gone into building this back-end. And most of the money, well, that will change with all these fundraised money, but most of the money so far has gone into developing a functioning back-end and not a really fully functional front-end that my grandma can use natively, right? Even for days I've been trying to update my Ethereum wallet, and I'm 1,200,000 blocks behind. So it's all quite still very. Well, yes.
I can introduce you to a couple of early Bitcoin friends who will tell you that Ethereum is actually a scam. So maybe that's the problem.
Well, I wouldn't. I do know. I understand. I have heard this attitude. I don't know if Ethereum is a scam. It's a very different thing than what Bitcoin is, for sure.
Let's maybe for the last round of questions. Let's ask this question. When we stick with cryptocurrencies and then also the blockchain, many people have called it a scam. You know, you even used the word. It slipped. The word pyramid scheme slipped in your presentation. You should work on that. And I think a little known person called Bill Gates, who you might have heard of, said that if he could do it easily, he would short Bitcoin. So that's interesting for me for two reasons. Because first of all, he could do it easily. So basically, he hasn't Googled it or Binged it. And second, do you on the podium? Do you agree? I mean, is this something? Is there a possibility that it's all a big scam by somebody, by CIA or the Russians, or I don't know, or is it the real thing? I mean, is it something that's going to stay, at least Bitcoin? So who wants to start? Maybe just.
I think it's definitely here to stay. Yeah, it sounds a little bit naive, but if you're driving a car, you can drive a car in a very bad way. Yeah, you can kill 30 people, or you can drive easily to Klagenfurt to have a nice vacation on the weekend. So it's really it's more or less the situation is the same like the internet in the 2000 at the 2000, because you can do good things, you can do bad things. We will see a lot of maybe fraud scenarios, but we will also see great things. So I think it's the best way is to deep dive into the topic, yeah, to really do some sort of investigation also on personal level, how to deal with it. But it's here to stay.
And it's funny, right? Because there's so much fraud in the sector.
Yeah.
And at the same time, people talking about using blockchain for fraud prevention.
Yeah.
So we're really at the start, right?
Yes. Well, I think that to answer your question, we really don't know who's behind Bitcoin. There is this theory about this one guy maybe being at least one of the founders or one of the masterminds behind Satoshi Nakamoto. It's all unclear. We really don't know, and for all I know, it could be the Mossad that is like Trojan horse and trying to. We don't know. Really, we don't know. But I think the technology is here to stay. And when you talk about fraud, I would like to point out fraud is only possible where people are misinformed or have too little education and information. In a hype phase, which we have right now, that is driven by headlines like a Bitcoin millionaire invested 100 and now a millionaire, you know. People, unfortunately, masses tend to fall for the hype without understanding what the technology is about. So we need more education. We need to tell the general public, and I told you already, I think the media has a very important role of disseminating this kind of information. We're trying this at the university.
We're also doing our best, you know.
I know, but it will take time. And you remember the early 90s, or even now I still get emails saying that, oh, you won in the lottery, please give us your bank account details and we will transfer you the money. This kind of fraud also happened in the early internet. It didn't mean that the internet itself was a scam, but people didn't understand. The early ages or days of e-commerce platforms, people didn't know whether they could trust a certain e-commerce site. If they paid something, whether they would really get the good. And then we had SSL certificates, etc. We had different mechanisms. People started to understand what is fraud. This is why we have the Impressumspflicht. Yeah? I need to understand who's behind it. I can look it up in a database, etc. So fraud happens where we have little information and where people are driven by get-rich-quick schemes. So we have to prevent that.
Absolutely. And also for information, we do need a German word for permissionless. Yes. So if anybody has...
Yes, if you find it.
Yeah, if anybody has a suggestion, maybe we have a contest or something. Mr. Schäfer, the question was, is it all a scam? Is it going to go away? Is it going to stay? I think you have a very clear view on that.
Yeah, well, I mean, as I said, I think it's a radically new innovation, right? And everywhere where you have got these types of radically new innovation, you have the phenomenon that you cannot calculate probabilities to assess the risk because you don't know simply what the future is going to be, right? And so instead of that, what you've got is a kind of evolutionary process where the ones that turn out to be the sustainable ones in the end survive, right? And so I think in that respect, I mean, as I said, I think most of those projects are going to go under, similar to what we had in the new economy in the second half of the 1990s, right, when there was the new economy bubble and all that. And so, so I think in that respect, everybody who is active in this area should be very skeptical. I think this should be the natural way of approaching things. But in the end, I do agree with Sherman, right, and with you actually, that in terms of the substance of the technology, it seems that it's so rich and there is so many things you can do, even though right now we cannot fully figure out what it is really going to be, such that calling it only a scam, I think, would be inaccurate also.
And maybe one last question. I mean, in your presentation, you basically said that the construction of Bitcoin, it flies into the face of conventional monetary theory, right? At which point do we have to rewrite the economy books?
Well, I think that's a great question, right? I mean, when I was young, which is a long time ago by now, when I was writing my habilitation, I wrote it about the pure theory of money. It's really about these very abstract things. What is money? Why do people use money? And all these kinds of things. Most of the people active in the area of research on monetary policy, for example, ignore that. They say, well, we know what money is and let's move on, right? What fascinates me about that is that now you've got these kids, right, who sit down, do the programming and earn a lot of money with that, which at the time when I was first studying those questions was a purely abstract academic thing, right? So I think in that respect, how you address these problems of trust and exchange, right? How do you address this famous double spending problem in the Bitcoin context? I think in that respect, the decentralized system that is now possible due to technological innovation is something people couldn't envision at the time, right? And so I think we do have to rewrite it, yes. I agree.
I had an interview with a very interesting entrepreneur in the field who is using, cryptoeconomics, which is a very important word, I think. And he said, imagine we finally have a use case for economists.
Right.
So maybe that's a positive...
right. I mean, what I find out in my classes is that it's the perfect topic to introduce monetary theory, right?
Great.
Definitely. So I've never been as successful.
So the lady has a microphone, and we have probably not 900 people, but please give a hand sign, and we're doing the classic one question, one answer thing. No pooling of questions. Perfect.
Hi. Thank you. I'm a bit surprised it wasn't mentioned tonight, but what are your thoughts on the future of the blockchain concerning the limitations in energy supply, for example?
Sure. I mean, the answer is peer-to-peer energy.
No, I think it was, you mean the energy inefficiency of Bitcoin mining? Yes, okay. It is an issue, and it's a huge issue. So when we look at Bitcoin, it introduced us the incentive machine. So it really introduced a great way of incentivizing people to validate transactions in a truthful way. And the way it does it is by the so-called proof of work, which incentivizes you if you are the fastest by solving a puzzle, mathematical puzzle. If you're the fastest computer to validate a block of transactions, the fastest you get rewarded. This is very energy intense. So I simplified that. This is very energy intense. And we need to work on it. And we already today have alternative cryptoeconomic incentive designs like proof of stake, where you don't need that energy intense Bitcoin mining. So if you look at Bitcoin, it really is one of hundreds of different blockchains that have a native cryptocurrencies, and newer ones already have moved on to proof of stake, which is less energy intense. And this is also one of the reasons why we created the there's a lot of research to do because it always needs to be have economics behind it that maintain the system integer and fault tolerant, attack resistant, and collusion resistant. So it's not easy to design alternative mechanisms to this energy intense proof of work, but it's possible. We're already seeing it, and this will be one of the most important research areas. And as far as I know, the ARTIS blockchain, which comes out of a collective in Graz, is already applying this alternative consensus mechanism.
But isn't it also important to have a system in place that A, works, and B, the validators need some kind of incentive to actually, put in some work for the integrity of the blockchain?
Yes, these proof of work systems are still hybrid, but I'm sure we will move away from it. We're already seeing also, but it's a matter of time, and there is a lot of research and applied research being conducted on this topic. Unfortunately, the media doesn't cover that aspect because the other headline is better. I'm not talking to you.
No,
here.
it's okay.
Yes. and also, I mean, it's energy intense, and there is no discussion about that. However, when we talk about the energy intensivity of, for example, Bitcoin mining, we never compare it to what is the CO2 footprint of running an entire bank and having hundreds and thousands of people commute to that bank every day. And I actually have a group of students researching that because research has not been done, so we can have an educated discussion about the carbon footprint, and we should have that discussion.
I think the Bundesbank actually had a study how energy efficient the euro is, and it's pretty energy efficient, they say. Right.
Okay, yes.
They do lots of transactions.
Depending on what your input variables are. So yes, this is a huge research area, but don't be worried. We're already looking into these things. Many blockchains are trying alternative systems, and I hope that we can also conduct some research here together with our partners, the TU, etc. Okay.
Bitte.
So what's your view on how's gonna regulations like GDPR affect mainstream adoption? Because in particular, GDPR is more like a
right to be
paradox
yes.
to blockchain.
Yes, unfortunately, the GDPR was written at a time where we already knew that we're moving into the distributed ledger technologies. And on an abstract level, the definition, from what I understand, I'm not a privacy expert. We do have the privacy lab here, which Ben Wagner is running. So that is a really big topic, and hopefully we will have a Crypto Monday in fall, maybe just on that topic. We have to redefine certain aspects, definitely, of GDPR. The right to be forgotten is a bit difficult in a distributed ledger that's immutable. I do think that we need to move the discussion from the right to be forgotten to the right to cryptography. And I think in a data-driven world, it's an illusion to think that data is being collected and it will only get more and not less. Looking at Internet of Things and all the Fitbits and all these devices we have with us all the time. So the question is, how can we protect our privacy in a data-driven world where there is realistically no such thing as right to be forgotten? So we need the right to cryptography that ensures that we can run big data applications that we need for our day-to-day operations while maintaining the privacy that we have. And on a legal level, at least in Austria and in Germany, we have the right to privacy of communication, which is embedded in the Briefgeheimnis. Unfortunately, for example, not only in Austria, but our current administration is thinking about getting rid of the Briefgeheimnis because they say that people are not sending letters to each other anymore. But that is a backdoor way of getting rid of the right to cryptographic encryption of my privacy. So we need to have that kind of discussion. It's not a technical discussion, it's a legal discussion. And I'm hoping that we can maybe address this.
Okay, thank you. We have one more question on the left, on my left side, and then on the right side. Bitte.
One question regarding Microsoft, the use cases and for the applications. We have heard the example of the land book in Estonia. So what I ask myself is, if you have a land book, even if it's on a blockchain, which will be a centralized blockchain, so one thing is you need a government to enforce it, right? To make sure that it is working. So the question of decentralization is not existing. But on the other hand, I ask myself, is it really a use case, or is it just to use the buzzword blockchain? Because Microsoft providing SQL database, which could be maybe the more efficient and cheaper and more easy to install technology, and not to use a blockchain just because of blockchain. So maybe it's just a waste of technology here. I don't know.
It's not easy to answer these questions, because during the preparation of this event, also with my colleagues, we've discussed several use cases. And yes, to some extent you are right. Yeah? There is some sort of misuse of the term blockchain here, but I think it's justified. Yeah? Because whenever you have some sort of improvement in place which really helps, and this is a known problem, then you can apply some sort of blockchain flavors to the use case, and that's what we are doing together with our partners. Yes, it is. Yeah, and there are different flavors between totally decentralized and some sort of central database, and we are using these concepts.
Can I just add one little thing that I was thinking about when during your presentation? All these use cases, delivery and identity. I mean, how do you make sure that there's like a human fault point, right, at the beginning? Something has to move into the blockchain first, so I can defraud there, right? I can get myself a fake ID on the blockchain in the beginning, and then it's on the blockchain and nobody can change it anymore.
Yes, this is where we are leveraging our platform in order to bring in some security concepts. It's not a permissionless concept that's mentioned several times before. You need some sort of authentication here, which is a little bit against the generic blockchain concepts. But we are leveraging to bring more simplicity into these use cases.
Okay.
And I think there's, as mentioned several times, there's a difference between the Bitcoin application, the Bitcoin use case, and some industry use cases.
Oh, okay, cool. Thank you. Bitte.
The question, and it's not for you, it's to the people here around, and who of you owns Bitcoins? Okay, thank you.
And how many people have already been hacked or lost some money or typed in the wrong address? Come on, be yeah, that's yeah. Thank you for the input. It's a good question, and it's about 14%. So I think all the rich people that own Bitcoin are here. Or Ethereum, yeah. Do I see where they're on the left side? I'm sorry. You have to. There's one over there, behind you. And then we will go to the other side. We have to be efficient here.
How important do you think a smart contract compatibility for the economic success of a blockchain?
How important is smart contract how important are smart contracts for the success of a blockchain? Yes, compatibility.
I don't quite understand what you mean with smart contract compatibility. Can you be more specific?
It's, for example, possible to run smart contracts on the Ethereum platform, but not on a Bitcoin platform.
Okay, yes.
And could this?
I think so. We already have protocols that are so smart contract compatibility. I'm not quite sure. If we have direct smart contract compatibility solutions. However, we do have protocols that are already working on kind of chain linking and making asset transfer between different blockchains more compatible. if we look at Cosmos and what Polkadot doing, etc. So I think the interoperability of blockchains is a huge issue. As for smart contracts, I haven't read too much about that, I must admit. But blockchain interoperability and asset interoperability, yes. Yeah.
My question is more like economical, so it addresses to you, but I think it's more macroeconomical, because in my opinion, we have failed so far to make proper financial education to the population, to the people, and now we have to, actually the task to educate them, yes. What is Bitcoin, what is blockchain, and so on. And when you're saying we are having a volatile Bitcoin and it's not suitable as currency replacement and so on, I somewhat contradict a little bit. Of course, the volatility is still high, but if you compare it like the total market cap we have now in cryptocurrencies, like a bit more than 300 billion, and if you compare that to the US dollar, and if you, let's say, okay, we give Bitcoin the chance and the potential to become like a world economy, world leading currency, replacing the US dollar. This is why Russia maybe started like being interested in Bitcoin 2 years ago. They put you in jail if you were exchanging Bitcoin against ruble. So my question is now, don't you think that this can be a big chance that we have the situation that sooner or later people will have the chance to use Bitcoins? In one country they can buy more, like we had in Italy. With a shilling we could buy much more. We were millionaires down there. And it's going to be somewhat the same with Bitcoin. In some countries you can buy more, in some countries you can buy less. So this is, I think, what is my opinion, but I'm not an economist, so maybe you can answer that more easily.
Okay. So first point, financial education is key. I agree. As a professor, I have to. But by the way, there is a professor also at WU here who is very much active in that area. And I think, generally speaking, the knowledge of the average people in Austria on financial matters is rather poor. So I think there is a big need to do that. I mean, for example, if you consider that 80% of all transactions that people make is in cash in Austria, right? So going from cash to Bitcoin is quite a leap, I would say. Concerning your second question, of course, in the end, nobody knows, right? I mean, my argument was about will a typical cryptocurrency replace a stable, well-managed currency as such, right? As you could say the dollar or the euro, right? Even though there are many things to criticize about that, right? So there's always, you have to be careful here, right? And there I think I try to provide a couple of arguments why I don't think that's true, right? Now, the other question I was also talking about is, so what will be then the new role of those cryptocurrencies, right? And I do think that within the crypto universe, they will have a big role, right? And a role we still have to understand, or we have to rewrite economic theory and all that, right? So, and to the degree to which conventional monetary systems or financial systems fail, there is a new alternative now, right? So I think it will be very interesting to understand this interaction between the old and the new, right? But still, when you think about the functions a currency is supposed to perform, right, it's so far away from that. And there are so many obstacles that also are unlikely to let ever have it move towards that, right, that I'm rather skeptical about that.
But it might work for at least a couple of years. It might work as a safe check, right? If inflation goes too high, people switch to Bitcoin, and then the government knows, or the central bank knows what to do.
Yeah, I mean, so that's a new option, right? Which will become available, and we will see. So if there's a lot of instability in the world, then potentially the role of such at least temporarily, of such cryptocurrencies could rise for some time, right?
Well, we haven't really seen Bitcoin in a real financial crisis yet, and it happens any day now. We have one more question in the front and one more question in the back, please.
My question is regarding to proof of stake, and do you think that researchers should make a Bitcoin proposal to move Bitcoin from proof of work to proof of stake just to reduce the energy consumption of Bitcoin, or do you think this is just too unrealistic because we all know Bitcoin is pretty slow at technology adaptation especially comparing to Ethereum?
Yes, I think you answered your own question. So I think it's a bit unrealistic. We saw the block size debate lasted two years in Bitcoin until the code was upgraded, and then we had it split into I don't know how many new Bitcoins.
No, there's only one. There's only one, and there's altcoins. There's no two Bitcoins.
Yes. And so yes, Bitcoin Gold, Bitcoin whatever, silver, Bitcoin Diamond. No, joking. But so yes, I think you answered your own question, which really is a good question, because in the end it leads us to governance questions. So the code is very efficient in automatically enforcing this machine consensus of everything that has been defined. But what if the circumstances change? Like now, we see it's because of the giant hash rate, it's becoming more and more energy efficient by the day. The bigger the network becomes, and we should change that. But how do you agree in a network of decentralized actors where people don't know and trust each other? How do people reach consensus of upgrading the code? And we're trying to, the idea of Bitcoin and blockchain was rule of code, you know, money without banks, companies without managers, and countries without politicians. And it's a very noble philosophy, and I think it will only be possible to a certain extent, because we will need centralized institutions when even in distributed systems or decentralized networks, because I don't think that we will be participating in every network decision making. So we will delegate probably our work, our vote in the network to somebody who will vote for us, maybe somebody who understands it better. So I wonder sometimes whether we're not just reinventing the operating system. It's cross-jurisdictional boundaries, but eventually we will have probably new points of centralization, because otherwise these systems become very slow.
But isn't it
in upgrading?
But considering the fact that we are sitting here because Bitcoin works for now 9 years with proof of work. Yes, it's energy inefficient compared to I don't know what, but it uses energy. Isn't it isn't it dangerous to open up the idea of moving to another consensus mechanism when there? I mean, yes, you said that the proof of stake is an idea, but not even Ethereum has moved to proof of stake yet.
Yes.
Yeah.
So maybe let's wait until Casper will be deployed. In Ethereum, Ethereum started out in proof of work, for all those who don't know, and had from the beginning on the roadmap, it had the idea to move to proof of stake. But this is ongoing research on the fly of an operating distributed ship. You know, and at some point in the near future, the idea is to move to this new proof of stake system. And we will see what will happen. And maybe, I don't think the Bitcoin community will do anything before that. If that goes well, I could imagine that maybe some voices in the Bitcoin community would maybe rethink this. But consensus mechanisms are super specific. Even the proof of work consensus mechanism of Ethereum, from what I understand, and I don't understand it in full detail, but those who do understand, who are experts on the consensus mechanism proof of work of Bitcoin, don't natively understand Ethereum, because they're quite different. So proof of work is not proof of work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So raise of hands for the last round of questions, please. Der Herr in der ersten Reihe, and then we have 1, 2, 3, 4 questions, and then we're done for the day.
As a conclusion of the energy inefficiency of Bitcoin, who of you would agree that Bitcoin itself, among the cryptocurrencies, has no future?
Who would agree? That Bitcoin has no future among cryptocurrencies. It will be replaced by something newer, better, shinier. Yes.
I mean, I don't give public investment advice, right? But I mean, very obviously, right? This kind of system cannot, I mean, so it's limited to a scale which already now is getting closer to the limits of the, right? And so I think it's impossible, and it would also be irresponsible, right, to really base these new crypto systems on proof of work, which consumes so much energy as Bitcoin does as of now, right? But I mean, as Shermin said, so this is really, I mean, I was very, I didn't talk really about technological issues here because I'm not an expert on that, but there are of course many other also about the scaling question, right? So it's very hard to put like the transactions of a country only as Austria on such a network, right? So I think overall, we have to move on to other ways of validating transactions, right? So what this means then for Bitcoin and when this is going to kick in, I don't know. As a matter of fact, what we see again in technology in general is once a standard has been established, it's surprisingly resilient very often, right? So I don't think that, I mean, what I can say is that I don't think it's going to go under in this year or something like that, right? But in the longer term future, so there is an issue here, right?
Yeah. I don't know. It really is hard to say. I do agree these things are resilient, even if they're not the best solution. When it comes to scaling, I mean, the Lightning Network is already active, so we're already moving away from the scalability issue. So it really depends how the Bitcoin community will tackle a lot of these issues. And that is hard to predict, and it also depends on what happens in the rest of the market. And it also depends on so many regulatory aspects. If all the countries in the world, or a majority of the countries in the world, start regulating Bitcoin or banning it for whatever reason, which I don't think, because it's not anonymous, it's pseudonymous, and regulators love Bitcoin because you can actually find the people. But all these questions, so really it's hard to tell the future. And you need to stay up to date and really understand how the ecosystem, what's really happening in the ecosystem, what's happening with the competitors, to be able to evaluate whether it will vanish or not. I think the likelihood of it vanishing soon is quite low, because of network effects, most and foremost. There's too many economic vested interests in that thing, and I'm not talking about people holding Bitcoin, but I'm talking about a whole industry of applications building on top and around it. So it's not likely to go away, but it's not impossible. So.
Yeah, do you want to add something? It was to the whole podium.
No, I think I'm just thinking again about the question, because I think it's a little bit different. This Bitcoin and Co. is more or less a revolution. We have seen it, it's a revolution. Yeah? What we are doing is we are leveraging our digital advisors to go into a discussion with customers in order to solve their challenges. Yeah? But it's not, you have to respect some boundaries. Yeah? You can't apply concepts which are totally out of the traditional company world, so you need to deal with some sort of regulations, industry regulations, also given circumstances within customers, and you need to go into the discussion with different stakeholders how to solve these challenges. So I think there is some sort of difference between the generic discussion about cryptocurrencies in general, yeah, and the industry use case. I think this is important.
Thank you. With 3 more questions, bitte.
I have a question in addition to the money topic you talked about, because for hundreds of years our economies and our whole monetary system is built on inflation, and now we have a deflationary system, and I would be interested in what you think, how much this could influence or even change our economy or society, because it's such a different concept.
Right. I mean, there is an important question about what the optimal inflation rate for an economy is, right? So is it 0? Is it positive? Is it negative? As a matter of fact, many people who specialize in this area agree that it's actually slightly positive, right? So we know that many central banks set their target inflation rates at a level around 2%, roughly speaking, right? And this has to do with rigidities in the price system, right? Particularly wages are rigid. Downwardly rigid. We don't want to cut nominal wages, but we still need price adjustment in the system, right? And if we have got some positive inflation rate, not too high, then this makes these relative price adjustments easier. That's the standard argument normally. what is also very clear is that deflation is a huge threat to an economic system, right? So the problem is inflation is something you can always fight as a central bank. You just need to set interest rates high enough. With deflation, that's not true, because at some point you reach the so-called zero lower bound, right? You can lower rates down to zero, and maybe a little bit below that, but not much, right? And the problem is that for balancing the macroeconomy, deflation is a much bigger problem, right? And so coming back again to the question of money growth rules, Bitcoin would be a terrible currency from a macroeconomic perspective, because if you have a growing economy, this would mean that you would have eternal deflation in the system, and this is going to not work on a scale we cannot really imagine, right? I mean, just to give historical examples, so probably the strongest period of deflation was after the in the Great Depression, actually, right? When prices were falling by 10% per year for some time, right? And this creates enormous, much bigger problems than inflation in the system, right? So in that sense, I think, well, central bankers typically say the best policy against deflation is avoiding it. So I think also any monetary system would have to avoid that, right? So a slightly positive inflation rate is something which overall seems to work best. There's a discussion whether we should increase actually target rates now. But
because we're undershooting them, so that we can.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we can talk about this on another evening. 2 more questions, please.
My question is a bit more technically again. So you were saying that encryption is a very important part of blockchain and also cryptocurrencies. So now we can also observe that computing power is increasing rapidly and is expected to reach a level where it can decrypt the current encryption technology within the next few years. So how do you think will that impact the diffusion of blockchain and cryptocurrencies? And also, do you think, I don't know, will there be a development on the encryption side?
Yeah. I mean, cryptography is really a very seasoned science. And the level of cryptography that Bitcoin uses, so you're right, cryptography is an arms race, but cryptography is also improving, and the cryptography that, for example, Zcash is using is very, very different to that which Bitcoin is using, not only from an anonymity perspective. So I think that's question, but at the same time non-question. So yes, you're right, but at the same time it's an arms race, and it's a very interesting question beyond privacy. It's like, I think the races of the future, the wars, they said the wars of the future are not real physical wars. In the 80s, they said it's economic wars. Then we saw that in the information age, it became the information wars. And now I think it will become the encryption wars of attacking networks, you know. There are a lot of interesting political questions also around attacking a system and to break it. And one attack actually is the attack by hard fork, so to split the coin. So yes, you're right, but it's an arms race.
Okay, so there was one question here, and I think then we have to wrap it up, because otherwise we're going to sit here until Bitcoin is no longer.
What do you think about the new money collecting concept of airdrops from platforms like EOS or Tezos?
Well, maybe we have to explain first what that is.
Okay, it's like kind of airdrops is when certain startups or projects that had raised funds or they kind of donate to existing addresses parts of their funds. It's like an random incentive scheme that's not in the code, but the kind of the team decides. And it started last year, and I think that's very interesting. And it's also, what is it? It's like from legal, I don't know what is your specific question, or whether I think it's good or bad, or what implications it has.
No, I just generally want to have more information about it and would like to know what you know.
It's a new phenomenon. Like 2 years ago, it was like ICO became a thing, and now airdrops became a thing. It's like people, it's like randomly deciding they have money and they airdrop it to certain addresses. And it could be a private person, it could be an institution, and it's like donating money. Without consent.
I think one of the most important issues is that if you give it away for free, the government cannot come afterwards and say this is security. I think that's the idea, right? Because they are afraid now that the American government will come in, the SEC will come in and say Ethereum is a security, Ripple is a security, and that would completely change the landscape. And then only tokens that did not have an ICO would basically survive. The lady in the last row, she had a question, and then that's the last question. So last row, last question.
Last question.
Yeah, the last question. I do the same thing in interviews.
Thank you so much. So my question is that there are growing economies like India and China, especially India. I've come from India. So the government of India has considered it as an illegal tender. Cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. So how do we move forward? Whereas the Western economies, the US or the European countries are telling us that, you know, it's a growing economy and Bitcoin, we should use it. Whereas the the Eastern economies, the Indian economies or the China, they are banning it. So how do we go ahead? The Indian government has considered it as an illegal tender.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is part of the legal backlash I talked about before, right? So, I mean, definitely since the beginning of this year, we have seen many moves of governments, of international organizations going into that direction. And so this is what I said before. I think you have to make peace with the law, right? Otherwise, this is not going to prosper. And so this is actually a very strong example where you see where governments have taken already very specific steps to keep that very much under control, right? So if you do not fix those legal issues, and so I'm actually very happy that in our research institute we have many lawyers there, then I think this is going to be a huge drag on the development of it, right? Because there is it's a contradiction, right? There is no way of reconciling it.
But does it work? Just, you know, now say it's banned, you know? I mean,
not really. Like blockchain really is one of the driving force in this new decentralized web stack we're building, and we're not there yet. But once the web is fully decentralized, right now we still live in an internet of centralized data structures, also centralized IP addresses, etc. Once we move, once IPFS becomes a real thing, etc., censorship will become a difficulty. So I see that as a potentially temporary backlash. From a technical perspective, it will be difficult to censor the Web3 once it's fully deployed. But on a KYC level, you can. So we are already seeing that every interesting ICO is doing what the ICOs didn't do in the beginning. They're doing an ICO with a full-fledged KYC process, know your customer, anti-money laundering regulations, etc., because they don't want to get that regulatory backlash. And KYC, in my opinion, can also be a tool of repression. So I don't think it's a technical, but maybe with the individual you can, and over certain applications you can limit it.
Okay, thank you very much. There's one last question, but we need the microphone because there's cameras rolling. So, oh yeah, I'm sorry. I am very sorry. This is the last one. After this, we're done.
The advantage of being in the first row.
Yes. Well, last row, first row.
Hello. Okay, could you please take a statement regarding Tether, because there was this kind of Ponzi scheme going on, and
another thing we have to explain. Yeah. First, another thing we have to explain before we take a statement, right?
Tether, maybe to explain it, I cannot unfortunately answer your question. I have too limited partial information. But Tether, to explain what the question is about, is the stable coin or a kind of a currency. It's a it's pegged. It's a pegged, yeah. It's a pegged US dollar, pegged to the US dollar. And from what I hear in its partial information, there might have been problems with accountability of really having it as an asset backed, whether it's really backed, pegged to the dollar. And it's very difficult. I cannot make any public statement. I have too little information.
But it's
very controversial.
But it is pretty easy. There's never in history been a currency that has been as pegged to something else, like as the issue of the currency has stated. So you can absolutely be sure that it's not one-to-one backed, like the gold standard was never one-to-one backed. But there's also the other perspective that I just stumbled upon a couple of days ago, where people saying, Circle, the app that is backed by Goldman Sachs, they are now coming out with a US dollar stablecoin. And basically they're saying that the whole Tether hysteria has been to cause a disruption there, so other people can move in and do the same thing. Maybe it's that, I don't know.
That's probably one of the biggest dangers in the market, because it's like, as you say, it's one-to-one pegged. It's like 20% of the market capitalization in real euros, or
Tether
fiat currency.
Is a huge issue. Some people are afraid that the market might collapse when these things collapse. Yeah.
We have two problems, like Mt. Gox and Tether currently going on, or it's the two biggest issues, in my opinion. I know, like, what is your opinion about this?
One last question. That was the deal. That was the deal. Well, you're talking about the Mt. Gox coins getting sold off. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to comment on this. Too little information. That would be misleading. Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry. So basically what we know is that we don't know enough and that we need more information. Exactly. I, for one, and we at the Presse will try to deliver that information. We are available in print and app and online, and please send lots of emails to our editors demanding more crypto stuff. That does work. It does work. Thank you everybody on the podium for this very interesting talk. Thank you everybody in the audience. I hope to see you again soon, probably after the World Cup, because during the World Cup we don't do podiums, right? Okay, thank you very much. Good night.